What's up, everybody? Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you could watch from the beginning to the end to help us in the algorithm, we're going to be talking about this article again from blacknonbelievers.org, and it's a reference to Jesus' failed prophecy about his return. People saying Jesus was a false prophet. We looked at yesterday, a lot of their accusations stemmed from a misunderstanding of Daniel chapter 7 and Jesus's use of the terminology found in Daniel chapter 7, where they saw the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, coming with the clouds of heaven. And they're like, that's the second coming. But no, that's Daniel chapter 7, right? So this article stems from a misunderstanding of Daniel chapter 7. And so this article is broken up into 3 videos that we're making. The first one had to do with what Jesus taught during his lifetime. The second has to do with what the New Testament writers believed. And then the third one is dealing with excuses that people are making today. So we're going to get into what he says about the New Testament writers and what they believed. It says, long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to us, to our fathers by the prophets, but in these last days, he has spoken unto us by his sons. Yeah, we are in the last days. The last days began with the coming of John the Baptist, because it says that since the last days began, the end of the age has been preached. John the Baptist taught about Judgment Day. John the Baptist taught about the end of the world. John the Baptist said Jesus would do 2 things. He'd baptize with the Holy Ghost, and he would burn the chaff with unquenchable fire. And that's a reference to the Day of Judgment. So we have here the Hebrew author stating that in the last days, God spoke to us by his son. Okay, the next chapter says that the teachings of the Messiah were confirmed by miracles from those who heard him. So that tells us the Son speaking included the days of his life before he died. So the last days includes the life of Jesus. But Jesus in John chapter 6 taught about the last day when the dead would be raised. Okay, if we're in the last days, right, if there's a set time frame, if we're in the last days, that tells us that history or the future will come to an end. So if we're in the last days, that tells us there will be a last day. And if we are in the last days and there's a last day, then what that tells us is we're only getting closer. We're only getting closer. We're in the last days. We're only getting closer to the last day. So that in and of itself. So he's saying this is what the New Testament writers believed. This is what we still believe today. Now, these things happened to them as an example, but they were written for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come. This is the same thing. The generations of the world are coming to an end. Since John began preaching and Jesus and his apostles, Judgment Day has been preached. Remember, Jesus taught that on the day of judgment, it'd be better for the men of Nineveh who repented at the preaching of Jonah. He said, then for you. So like he's telling people about Judgment Day, about the end of the age, that the dispensation, the time period that we're living in with the coming of the Son of Man, this is the final time period. There's not going to be any time period upon the earth after this one. Jesus will hold all authority until Judgment Day and then deliver back the delegated authority to him back to the Father. It says, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. The day's getting closer. There's the last days, and it's coming towards the last day. And also, this could be when it says the more as you see the day drawing near, this could be a reference to the day of the assembly. Like, okay, the day of the assembly is the first day of the week. As it's getting closer, encourage someone like, hey, you going to be there? Like, for example, if it's Monday, you see a fellow saint and you're like, hey, you going to be there this upcoming first day of the week? They're like, yeah, Lord willing. And then Saturday comes on and it's like, hey, I'm going to see you there tomorrow, right? You're encouraging them until the day of the assembly comes. Or this could be the day of judgment. Either way, it's the same thing. You're encouraging one another, and there's a day that is getting closer. So we have, children, it is the last hour. And as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come, therefore we know that it is the last hour. Yeah, we're living in the final time period where Judgment Day can occur at any time. It's the last hour. That doesn't mean, and the word hour, it means season. We're in the last season. And this is the thing. Jesus taught certain things needed to be fulfilled before the second coming could occur. That's what Paul taught in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. But certain things needed to be fulfilled before the second coming could occur. And all those things have been fulfilled. And so he's telling us like, hey, these things are being fulfilled just as they were pre-warned to you. And so you have to know that Judgment Day is going to be able to occur at any time, even in your lifetime. So the fact that Judgment Day didn't occur in their lifetime doesn't mean that Judgment Day won't occur. It's that God is providing opportunity for people to come to a knowledge of the truth. It says here, do not seek a wife. This is what I mean, brothers. The appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none, and those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as though they had no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they have no dealings with it, for the present form of this world is passing away. So this isn't telling, because he says, what did he say? He said, from now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none. So he's like, what? So the husbands are to disregard their wives? No, that's not what he's teaching, because Paul later tells husbands to love their wives, but yet he says, let those who have wives live as though they had none. So you want the husbands to disregard their wives, not care for them, not love them. That's not what he's teaching here. So you have to understand the context of 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 27 through 31. He's dealing with the time period of persecution that they're currently going through. They're going through a time period of persecution that their spouses would be persecuted. They themselves would be persecuted. And he's letting them know they have to be strong. They have to be able to get through this certain time period. But this in no way is saying that you should neglect your wife, right? This is just a total taking out of the context and including this in here. But it says the present form of this world is passing away. So, and that is true. The persecution that they were going through, it would come to an end. And also we see that generation to generation desires change, and also the things of this world, like marriage is of this world. Marriage is not going to be in heaven. Mourning is not going to be in heaven, but we see rejoicing is going to be in heaven. The goods, though, of this world are not going to be in heaven. So you have to understand all of this in light of this statement right here. What is he trying to tell them? What is he trying to tell them? And all of this is to be viewed in the light of this statement. The present form of this world is passing away. What is he saying there? He's not saying this generation is going to be the last generation before the world ends. That's not what he's saying at all. So if that's what you're reading out of that, that's what you see out of this, that's not what Paul was teaching there. Paul is not teaching Judgment Day is going to occur within our lifetime. He's letting them know to look to the world to come and beyond this one, because the cares and concerns of this life aren't going to be led into the age to come, right? The struggles of this life, the desires of this life aren't going to be that which is of the age to come. So he's letting them know to look beyond the physical to see the eternal. The end of all things is near. The end of all things is near. And it says at hand. This is the Greek word for at hand. And all this means is, and this is Peter. Peter wrote 2 Peter chapter 3. In 2 Peter chapter 3, he was teaching about the end of this world. And so what we learn is he's letting them know that that's the next on the timeline of events, right? Jesus said that two things needed to be fulfilled first, at least, the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, and then the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7, and then the end of the world could happen at any time. So 1 Peter was written letting them know, like, hey, all things are going to be fulfilled in our generation. Therefore, the second coming could occur. And when I say all things, I mean all things except the second coming. So therefore, he's saying, if everything's going to be fulfilled, then the second coming could happen in our generation. So he's letting them know, yeah, it is at hand. How at hand is it? Is dependent upon when God sends his son. But the fact is that Judgment Day has been ready since the first generation. And that's what That's what the scriptures teach. He is ready to judge the living and the dead. I believe Peter said that too. It says these passages show that these New Testament writers did believe the apocalypse was very near. They were clear that they were living in the last days when Jesus was to return in the clouds and bring about the end of the world as they knew it. Okay. So he's saying, though, for certain, like they were living in the generation. They're acting as if the writers believed they were living in the generation that the world would end. That's not true. They didn't believe for certain that they were, but they believed there was a possibility, but not a certainty. There's a difference between a possibility and a certainty. And Paul in 1 Thessalonians 4 writes and includes himself in the possibility, but it's not a certainty. Look what he says. For this we declare unto you by the word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will not precede those who have fallen asleep, meaning we won't go to heaven before those who have died. For the Lord himself would ascend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So we shall always be with the Lord. Why did Paul include himself in the we? Was Paul expecting to be alive when Jesus came? No, he knew it was a possibility. Because then you have 2 Timothy chapter 4, I believe it is, where he's saying that he's going to die. The time of his departure is at hand. So you have what? Paul in 1 Thessalonians 4 contradicting himself in 2 Timothy chapter 4? No. It's just that Paul knew that Jesus will come while Christians are alive. And the fact that Paul was still alive showed that there was a possibility of him being alive when Jesus came, because it was possible Jesus came in the first century, but it wasn't a certainty. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. Yeah, that's reference to living Christians. Paul knew he was going to die. 2 Timothy chapter 4. The coming of the Lord is near. The judge is standing right at the door. James chapter 5, verse 8-9. Yeah, the end of the world, judgment day, is ready to be initiated at any moment. And guess what? That means that the judge is ready to judge the living and the dead. So let me see. Got a few more stuff. The writer of these passages tells those who he was writing to that Jesus was coming in their day. Never said that. You notice they never said that. They included a possibility of it, but they act like that's a certainty of it. He recognizes that some believers had already died, causing concern among the fulfillment of Jesus' prediction. He reassures his readers that they would not all die before Jesus comes. That's not what he said. That's not what he said. He tells them that believers who have died will be resurrected when Jesus returns upon his arrival. Resurrected believers and those who are still alive will be instantaneously transformed into immortal beings and are raptured up together to meet Jesus in the sky. Note that his consistent use of the word we, the writer was obviously not speaking of Christians in some distant future, but of believers in his day, including himself. There's no good reason to read we as if it refers to Christians alive thousands of years later in the future. Okay, well then there's no reason to believe because it says Jesus died for us. What makes you think that that includes anyone not alive at that time, either before or after it? You see what I'm saying? He's acting as if we or us is only limited in every context to only those alive at that time. That would be silly. That would be silly. What we see though is that Paul said we and us because he included himself in the possibility. And then like even in 2 Peter chapter 3, where it says God is long suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish. But who's the usward? Was Paul talking about himself as if he thought that he was going to go to hell on judgment day? No, he thought he'd go to heaven. That's what 2 Peter chapter 1 says, that there was an entrance into the everlasting kingdom that would be abundant to him. Right? So even though Peter included himself in the word us, doesn't mean that he included himself in the judgment that would come upon unbelievers. He just said us in a reference to humanity. So the context determines what the we and the us represents. Revelation. So now he's quoting Revelation. Revelation is not about the second coming of Jesus. None of these passages are about the second coming in Revelation. Revelation is not about the end of the world, no matter how end of the world it might sound. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of the prophecy, heed the things which are written in it, for the time is near. The entire book of Revelation's about Daniel chapter 7, not the end of the world. And if you misunderstand Daniel chapter 7, you're going to misunderstand the book of Revelation, and then you're going to create articles like this. He said to me, these words are faithful and true. The Lord, The God of the spirits of the prophets sent his angel to show his bondservants the things which must soon take place. Behold, I am coming quickly. Behold, blessed is he who heeds the words of the prophecy of this book. He said to me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is near. Behold, I am coming quickly. My reward is with me to render to every man according to what he has done. He who testifies to these things says, yes, I am coming quickly. And that's Revelation 22. This is not about his second coming. This is about Daniel chapter 7 coming to. It's a figurative, symbolic coming, just like Isaiah 19, the Lord rode the cloud into Egypt. Wasn't literal, right? This is not Jesus's literal coming. And if you notice, the Greek word parousia, Parousia, is used in reference to Jesus's presence. It's never used once in the book of Revelation because his second coming is not under consideration. People misunderstand the book of Revelation highly. John recorded that his visions are also foretold a return of Jesus near to his day. He was repeatedly told throughout his visions that Jesus was about to return soon. That's not his second coming. That's Daniel 7. It is unreasonable to think that near, soon, and coming quickly could mean thousands of years in the future, especially in light of Jesus' own prophecy that some of his listeners and the high priest would still be alive to see him return. Jesus did not teach the high priest the second coming would occur in that generation. He taught them Daniel 7 would be fulfilled in that generation, but not his second coming. People, if you don't understand Daniel 7, you're not going to understand some of Jesus's language. It's just as simple as that. You have to study Daniel 7, and then you'll understand Jesus's language. It's not entirely impossible. It is possible. I have a book on it. If you want to see the book, it's on my website, oroville530.com, and it explains a lot about it. And it's very, very positive, very positive. So, but if you have any thoughts, what do you think about this? What do you think about this person just misapplying statements and making up excuses for why they're not true when we have shown reasons like we and us includes in certain contexts, not just Christians, not just those who are alive. It shows a misunderstanding of this author of this article and those in fellowship with him. So what are your thoughts? Thanks for watching this video from the beginning to the end. Leave a comment below and I'd like to hear what you think.